Welcome to the County Manager's Report. I'm Lloyd Higuera. With me is Interim County Manager Larry Werner. And welcome, Larry.
Thanks, Lloyd. It's a pleasure to be here again.
And yeah, we meet a couple times a month, don't we? So for this program. How's it going as the Interim County Manager? You've been the Interim County Manager for about a month now, I guess, a little over a month?
Yeah, a little over a month. It's been exciting.
Is it coming into a regular routine yet, or is there still
It is.
things?
It is. Yeah, it's just, and I think a lot of that is just, the staff is really wonderful, and I think there's a lot of processes and procedures in place that actually make functioning pretty smooth. So, as long as I don't mess it up, I think it'll be okay. So.
Okay, well, those are words to live by, as long as I don't mess it up. Well, Larry, we're going to talk about the May 15th meeting of the Douglas County Board of Commissioners. That was up at Lake Tahoe. And at that meeting, water was on the agenda, quite a lengthy discussion and a lot of public comment, too. And in the final analysis, commissioners directed staff to move ahead with establishing consolidated monthly water rates for Douglas County's water systems up at Lake Tahoe.
That's correct. And the modification from the decision that was made in March was to maybe not consolidate the debt from the different water systems. The idea of consolidation makes sense, and even the residents of the water systems thought that the consolidation would be good for everybody, but they were concerned about equities and inequities and subsidies between systems, taking care of existing debt payments and stuff. The comment was made all along that future debt would always be the responsibility of each separate system. So I think the testimony we heard and the analysis we did prior to the meeting suggested that probably was a more equitable position, and I think the commissioners felt that way too. And so we're now looking at bringing back. So we'll have to renotice again and then bring back at a subsequent meeting the resolutions to set the rates, but it'll be based on consolidated O&M and independent debt.
This is really kind of a historic move, isn't it, for Douglas County? They've talked about this for years and years, and finally to actually consolidate up at the lake is quite a feat.
It's a remarkable feat. It's really, I think it makes sense. From an outsider looking in, it certainly does make sense. But yeah, to get your disparate areas to come together to do this is really is remarkable.
Yeah.
It says a lot for the leadership of Douglas County, the commissioners and staff.
How long do you think it'll take before the rates come, back before the commissioners? And
probably, I'm thinking around 30 days, so it won't be long. It won't be a long stretch. We want to try to get those in place as close to the new start of the fiscal year, July 1, as we can. The budgets were built around some increasing revenues and that sort of thing, so kind of want to get that started. So.
Okay. And there is also an associated item that was along with that, commissioners deciding to continue an item establishing a single enterprise fund for the future consolidation of Lake Tahoe water systems. I guess because they haven't actually set a rate, they're going to wait to establish the fund? Exactly.
We talked about that and thought we could go either way, and they felt it would be less confusing if we just brought those two items back together again.
Yeah.
And it's exactly as you said, Lloyd. It's an accounting process, and it kind of sets up a fund for the enterprise account once you consolidate. So, so didn't really make a lot of difference. But.
Right. And I guess there'll have to be quite a bit of money in that enterprise fund when it all gets going. I mean, for the repairs to the system and all that type of thing.
Right. They were talking about significant debt in the future to kind of get that. But what this would do is allow the preliminary engineering reports to start being developed for each system and try to define really what needs to be done over the near future, and then start looking at the rate structure for that. Some of the things that they are looking at with a consolidated rate is to begin to build a reserve fund, for a better way to say that, is to deal with the ongoing small break fix kinds of things. So that'll be accomplished as well, and try to get the systems back up and get them running well.
And having the money in a separate enterprise fund, does that help with the bonding mechanism at all, or have much to do with that at all?
It does. What it does is it brings a larger customer base. So when you look at selling bonds, you have a bigger base to spread the debt service over, and that is always better in the eyes of the bondholders. If it's too small of a system and too large of a burden on a single entity, it can be troublesome trying to get good rates on bonds, that sort of thing. So overall, it should certainly help the position of the county.
Well, from the point of view of the county, having the water systems up at Lake Tahoe consolidated and the county-owned ones in the valley consolidated really is a move forward.
That's a major step. It
Yeah.
is. It really is.
Yeah.
So even
Okay.
though we're having a few hard rocks on the ones in the valley, but we'll get through that.
Oh,
too.
sure, sure. Well, the next item on the agenda, if you can explain this to my satisfaction, I'll be one happy person because I was at that meeting and I'm not sure I understood all that was going on, but commissioners did hold a very lengthy discussion to clarify the definition of live music entertainment and special events in the liquor code. And what was decided there, this has come up a couple of times before, and it never seems to get resolved. And there seems to be several sticking points on it.
And I'm not sure it's resolved yet. I think what happened on the 15th was for the board to give direction to the district attorney's office in drafting an ordinance that still has to come back. But, and I may be trying to simplify it too much, but I think the issue is not to inhibit people that wanted to gather and play music or freedom of speech or anything else that might occur spontaneously. But if it's associated with a liquor establishment, then there probably needed to be some rules. And they're saying that if that's going to happen in front of, in proximity of an established business, a liquor license holder, then there really needed to be application for a permit to kind of control and regulate the process. I think people have looked at that at both bookends. One of them saying extreme, that they're trying to stop any kind of music, entertainment, spontaneous kind of stuff, and that certainly wasn't the case, although I see the social media is talking that way. Because you still have the right to do whatever you want. If you want to appear in front of the steps of the city hall or county courthouse,
Sure.
then you have the right to do that. Like I say, it's only associated when you start associating with a business, then it really needs to have some sort of regulation. And I think the idea is to if things kind of get out of hand, it gives the sheriff's office some definition on what to do. Either it's under a permit or it's not under a permit, or it has standards that are established that they have to comply with as far as noise and those kinds of things. So I don't see it as onerous as we're hearing that it is out there in the community, but I think it makes sense from trying to regulate something that could get out of hand, and there have been some complaints. So I think we're still a ways away from having finalization of this process. So you'll see it come back as ordinance with one or two readings still. So.
Yeah, the hardship here really is placed on the deputies, isn't it? Because they have to be called, they're called out.
Right.
And then they have to make a judgment, and they don't really have anything to back them up. It's their call, I guess, really, isn't it?
It is, and it's...
They don't like that.
Well, it puts it in the definition of a public nuisance, and that's fraught with all kinds of issues. And a peace officer on their own cannot declare a public nuisance. It has to be some form of outside complaint or process that then involves the regulatory agencies. They then have to make a judgment call as to whether or not it is a problem, and it really does. It puts the particular officer who shows up on the scene, his personal decision as to whether or not this is a problem, and there's really nothing to measure it against.
Right. It's a lot easier, though, if there's clearly defined guidelines. I mean, you can say, look here, you can't do this,
Exactly. It sets time frames, it sets conditions. I mean, it just makes it a lot easier. And if you're operating under a permit, you really don't have to declare a public nuisance. You can say, you know what, we're gonna revoke the permit, or we're gonna do something else. I mean, you can do different things that don't get quite so legalistic, I guess.
Uh-huh. So this one will be coming back, I assume.
Yes,
unfortunately. Another rewrite on this?
Yes.
I see, okay. Yeah. Okay, well, we'll be watching for that one. Well, also on that May 15th agenda, commissioners approved a land division map for a tentative subdivision, and this was to convert 64 apartment units into condominiums up at State Line.
Correct, right. And I think that it's pretty pro forma. It's probably would have headed that direction had the economy not changed originally. And now that people are backing to kind of the purchase mode, then it's an opportunity for this particular landowner to look at converting it and actually creating subdividable spaces within the apartment unit and now are condos. So if that makes any sense at all. But
yeah, I think they said in their presentation that these units, these condominium units, would be about $200,000, and that at Lake Tahoe, I mean, that's incredible.
Well, that's
I may
exactly
buy one
right.
of those.
Yeah. And that's the advantage. If you go to high cost areas, then that I can. So you speak to Lake Tahoe, Seattle area, different areas, you'll end up with a lot of this situation where people can get into starter homes as a condominium unit.
Yeah. Okay, very good. One last item from that meeting was commissioners hearing a presentation on the Nevada Public Land Management Task Force's preliminary report to the Nevada Legislative Committee on Public Lands. That's a mouthful, but what are they up to?
Well, I think it has to do with a lot of the angst between different parts of Nevada and the federal government over public lands, and maybe come up with a process where in other areas states have actually acquired public lands that the states manage. And I think this interim committee was to take a look at that and kind of come up with recommendations to the legislature that then to pass on to Congress about how we might want to, or how Nevada might want to do this. So I think it was a very nice presentation by Mike Boffman, who kind of has been the consultant for the committee. I know there are still, I think, quite a few unanswered questions that they're wrestling with, but I think at least brought it up to a status of kind of the history of what went on with land management in Nevada from the very get-go of statehood, and early years in selling off of lands that were state lands that had given to the state by the federal government, and then not try to acquire or get some of those back to manage themselves. So a lot more to come on that one too, Lloyd.
Yeah, and Nevada has the circumstance of having so much public land. I mean, that isn't privately owned. I mean, we have tons of it.
That's correct. I think at one time it was like 86% or something like that.
I think that was a figure I heard,
Yes,
at one time. So that is a huge issue.
Right, it is. And a lot of it depends on, I don't think we're quite as impacted in these areas, although we do have our conservation bills that Douglas County has in front of Congress now, which essentially does it at a micro scale for Douglas County, in trying to identify lands that more appropriately maybe ought to be traded to the county for management purposes, and then other lands that, exchanges between maybe the Forest Service and BLM, and a lot of it for conservation purposes. So there's, and that bill I think is slowly working its way through Congress. We kind of got an update several months, or gosh, about 6 weeks ago, I guess, from Senator Heller's office. We had met with a representative from Senator Heller's office to tour them around the county to show them the lands that were subject to this conservation bill. And so we're hoping that things will happen with that down the road. So.
Okay. Well, very good. Well, we've pretty much covered the May 15th meeting of the Douglas County Board of Commissioners. Do we have a preview yet of the June 5th meeting of the Board of Commissioners?
I don't.
I thought it was kind of early.
Yeah, we've got an extra week in here this time, so it's kind of, we're kind of.
But there is one big item on this meeting, and that is location. It's not going to be in the usual location.
Right, because of the elections.
Right.
Yeah, the primary election, and I think we're meeting in the CVIC hall.
Yes, you're correct. Yes. And I did get notice of that because I have to record it.
Oh, that's right.
And so they let me know. It will be at the CVIC hall, same time and same everything, just different location.
Right.
Yeah. So, okay, well, people can, check the county's website for the agenda. That'll be probably coming up next week.
Correct. That's exactly right.
Okay. Another big event happening was the county's budget was passed here on May 19th. Commissioners held a public hearing as required by state law, and they approved the 2014-2015 budget for Douglas County. And how is Douglas County looking financially?
It was really a positive presentation. I think we're seeing some improvement in the economy. We're I guess kind of the new zero downfall is the new up, I guess is the best way to put it. But from what the information we were getting, it looks like the revenues are coming in a little better than we've seen in the past. Expenses are still being able to be held to a pretty tight level, which translates into better ending fund balances, which then allows us to deal with any type of emergencies or any kind of issues that come up. So we're not out of the woods yet. I think some of the things we looked at is that the revenue expenditure picture we're seeing today in 2014 is pretty much mirrors what happened in 2003. So it's been a significant increase over the early years of the years 2000.
Sure.
And up to 2007, and then now the downslide. But I think now it's kind of stabilized, and we're seeing an increase up there. So it's kind of a maybe a reset is the way to call it, is to kind of look back and things kind of got resettled, reestablished, and taking a look at services and how we provide the services. And actually there were some cost savings that occurred, and I don't think you'll see it come back to where it was in the the mid 2000s, 2007 or 8, mainly because we can't grow that fast and shouldn't grow that fast to provide the service that we're currently providing. So
Right.
it's kind of a roundabout way of saying that, maybe this was a good reset, and unfortunately it was kind of dramatic for a lot of people, but in the long run, I think it's going to be better overall for the economy of the county.
Well, the economic downturn eliminated one industry completely out of our economy, and that, of course, is the building industry.
That's
I
true.
mean, there's nothing happening, I mean, relatively speaking. Before, I mean, we were booming for so long, it just got to be normal.
Yes,
You know?
yes, and that's unfortunate. I always hold this old adage that, we were building houses for the people that were building houses, and, and at some point that's got to stop. So,
Yeah.
and I think that's where we got to, but it's looking good. I think we're looking much better.
Well, the county has worked hard to really readjust everything to fit the current economy. I mean, there's still something like 60 jobs that were eliminated in the overall scheme of things,
Right.
mainly by attrition. I mean, people
That's
leaving their jobs and not being replaced. There wasn't any mass firing or anything, but leaner and meaner. I mean, the county.
Absolutely, that's a good look at. And I think some of those will come back. In the particular, I think we saw in the public safety area, there's 3 positions being restored, and I think with the district attorney's office and some key positions, but they're really targeted positions. There's a lot of thought and evaluation and discussion that goes into restoring these positions, not just, let's just add more bodies, but it's really, like I say, a targeted decision as to whether or not this is important for service delivery to the community.
Okay. Any update on the county manager search? You updated us last time.
Well, and we do have, in fact, we just came from the Carson Valley Chamber of Commerce where a presentation was made on the county manager search.
Ah.
And Norma Santoyo is the county's human resources director, and she's working with Peckham and McKinney to go through the county selection process. There's a brochure out that describes the position, kind of talks about the county, talks about the process, and then who you should contact. The dates that are in here, we were looking at some of the key dates of trying to get the application closing deadline will be June 16th.
Wow, that's coming up.
It is.
Yeah.
I'm encouraged. And then there'll be a lot of screening and evaluation, and there's going to be a real concerted effort to involve the county stakeholders so that the stakeholders in some way get a kind of a skin in the game, I guess, the way to put it, on selecting their county manager.
Sure.
And we're trying to define those processes now specifically to to how we would do that, how we'd select our participants, screen the stakeholders, not screen, but select the stakeholders that would sit on these committees, and then they would then be advisory and provide information back to the county commissioners for the selection process. But the start date for the new county manager is hopefully going to be in September or no later than October. So that's the goal.
So that's really a very aggressive timeline there.
It is. It is. Yes.
Very, very good. Okay, so you may get back to retirement again by 2015, huh?
This has been fun, but it's made me realize that retirement is okay.
We have a little extra time here, and I thought it might be interesting to talk to you about the Minden to Carson City water pipeline. We've always talked about it from a Douglas County perspective, what all the benefits are and everything for Douglas County. And now we have the retired city manager from Carson City sitting here. I thought it might be interesting for you to give us the other side of it, the Carson City perspective, what it means to Carson City and
Certainly,
like that.
Certainly. It's interesting. A lot of this conversation started with a change in water quality standards related to arsenic. For years, ever since the Public Health Service was formed and then EPA was formed, the arsenic standard was like 50 parts per million. It's a number. And that basically was at the level of detection. Mm-hmm. So as equipment got better, we were able to find arsenic at much lower levels. So so the new standard came out at 10 parts per million that the public water system could not exceed that on a regular basis. What that did is took a lot of the systems in Nevada particularly, where we have any water that comes anywhere near hot springs, that they have high arsenic, high metals issues, basically what happens. So then treatment is being required, and I know Douglas County was looking at particularly like the East Valley systems, and they were probably looking $4 to $8 million worth of treatment process. Carson City was looking at arsenic treatment, and we were in the $10 to $12 million range, and that was kind of okay. And then we got hit with the uranium standard that came into place about 4 years ago. And what that did is took any of the water that came basically through the decomposed granite on the west side of the valleys, particularly Eagle Valley, where we had some wells in Carson City. The uranium standard was not being met, so that meant you would have to do uranium treatment. And when we started looking at the cost of the facilities, the cost of operations of those, we would have, I quit saying that, the city would have spent probably nearly $40 to $50 million to treat water that it was already serving. So a lot of conversations started happening within the region, and we reached out to Douglas County and said, look, we're going to be spending this money. What are you folks going to do? And the decision was made is, let's go buy water that is in good shape, clean water, like what comes out of Minden, and then work together to build a pipeline to take that water and move it. And that way, we're spending the money acquiring additional water sources, not just treating the water that we already had. And what that did is it meant also in emergency purposes and for short periods of time, we could use those wells in Eagle Valley and also in Douglas County for short-term purposes like peaking in the summertime, that sort of thing. Because these metals are an accumulation process. If it's short-term, you can meet the standard, but because you're not drinking it all year long.
Right.
So the decision was very clear that it would be better to spend money to work together to develop sources, get new water, allow for our future to be pretty much settled as far as water concerns were, and it would be a much better expense of money. So for Carson City, it made a huge difference in the fact that they were able to get water that they could supply the current customer base, and it was also by purchasing the water from the town of Minden that they had excess water rights. Then it basically secured the water needed for Carson City for probably the next 40 years. And I think Douglas and Minden and Indian Hills and all the other systems that are along that pipeline saw that same advantage. So by joining together, and we each paid our proportionate share, I think and we paid for the pipeline, the pumping stations, the water based on the potential demand. And Carson City was the biggest demand of that area. I think they were looking at like 4,500 gallons per minute on the pipeline at peak, and so it was a pretty significant cost. So we basically took that $30 to $40 million and turned it into the regional pipeline and the purchase of water. And I think everybody paid their share as they went along. I mean, Carson didn't pay for everybody's, but it was reasonably done, and it worked out to be just a wonderful solution to a real big problem.
Well, in the end, yeah, it saved Carson City a lot of money, didn't it? I mean, they would have had to build all those plants.
Yes.
And, I mean, it cost quite a bit of money to build the pipeline, granted, but still.
Well, and then as growth occurred again, they would have had to spend more money to secure additional water, because that money would have just treated what was already there and no real growth to it. So you potentially could, be at 150% of the cost of what was spent on that pipeline to look down the road. So.
Exactly. Well, that's very interesting to hear Carson City side of it. Whereas Douglas County side is mainly what we heard. On this particular program. Speaking to the Douglas County manager, of course. Well, Larry, our time is up, and I sure want to thank you for being here and sharing all the information you have. And that's what we do here on the County Manager's Report. I'm Lloyd Higuera for Interim County Manager Larry Werner, and we'll see you next time here on the County Manager's Report.